may not agree with us. Some, oddly enough, and I got to be honest, I was anticipating a lot of really, really, really big pushback from folks on this platform. So thank you for being gracious. Thank you for being welcome to some new ideas and some discussions. Looking forward to the coming year of continuing this. So really happy that we're moving in that direction. Tonight on the program, we're going to spend a little time with the professor. I'm my good friend, my executive producer, the Professor Brett Pransky, going to be here sharing some thoughts. Brett, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always happy to be here.
So we're going to go through some of the questions, and again, thank you for all the people who signed up for some quick questions to get just some thoughts. We got so many. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We had really thought some of these throughout the day. And then bang, all of a sudden we got a bunch more. Thrilled to see. Thank you. So let's start with the first question that we got, which is on the transgender issue. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the executive order to mandate equal access without regard to the biological sex of a person. This seems like a blow to women's rights. Gender identity can be manipulated much easier to gain an advantage against biological women. I am a bit confused about this executive order. What I'm a bit confused about first is how gender identity can be manipulated. Maybe we'll have a second for that. But for me, the answer, the quick answer, is Joe Biden did exactly what the Supreme Court said we should be doing, promoting equality. This is just him putting into the power of law what the Supreme Court said. For me, it is that simple. And I know this is a tough issue for a lot of people, but for me, at the end of the day, it's really all about equality, and that's equal protection under the law. Pretty simple for me. Brett, I wanted to get some of your thoughts on this because this is a complicated issue. This is one of those issues that is really put out there to elicit an angry response and to really keep us pitted against each other. So I wanted to get some of your thoughts on this, especially the part that gender identity can be manipulated for an advantage against biological women. I'm not getting that.
I think, I hope the listener, I hope I'm correct in interpreting the listener on this one. We're probably talking about some type of competitive advantage that I'm thinking has probably a lot to do with sports. I think that's kind of what we're talking about in those environments. And I think what the executive order did was kind of establish a baseline, meaning that there's a certain rule that we're all going to follow, and that rule is everybody gets to play and everybody gets to participate. And we all get to do that in an equal way. Now, what it also does is it leaves a really complex set of circumstances out there, and because it doesn't give us much direction as to how to do that, which is where a lot of these questions are coming from. Okay, we're all supposed to be equal. How do we do that? And the how we do that is the really complex part. It's also the part that we shouldn't run away from.
No, you're right. And
complexity is a good thing.
No, you're absolutely right. But at the end of this, some people are more equal than others. And I think the people who have been more equal than others seem to be pushing it back. Personally, this isn't my issue. Personally, it's one of these things where I say, at the end of the day, you have the right to follow your passions, to follow your path. And I'm no one to say you can't do that. And for me, as a labor guy, Brett, this is where I look at this question, and because I've actually run up against this in my work life, where most people haven't. I go back to the reality that this book that I promote so often, this is the labor contract under which I work in my full-time job at. It lays out everything in this book about my employment. What it doesn't say anything about sexual orientation and one group being separated from another. It doesn't matter who's doing the job. Everyone's paid the same. And years ago, we had a guy who was a Marine drill sergeant, Vietnam vet, probably one of the most badass guys I've ever met in my life, who disappeared for about 6 months, came back as a woman. Nobody gave him a hard time or gave her a hard time. Nobody said anything to her because she probably would have kicked everyone's ass, but went right back to her job and did her job as nothing would have happened. And that's how to me, that's the place where we need to get to. I didn't have to go home with that person. I didn't have to live in their skin. Doesn't matter to me.
Right. And I think that's where we end up. There's going to be a lot of complex conversations. And what the executive order does is it establishes a finish line. So I don't care how you get there, but you better get there. And I think that's probably a good place to be. It's going to bring on a lot of uncomfortable conversations, people having to come to terms with things that they're not necessarily terribly comfortable with. But at the end of the day, that's probably a good thing for everybody.
Yeah, and I have a good friend, and I think all of us, and this is where I think having these conversations are important, because I have a really good friend who I've known for years. I've known Bob for 15 years. Bob, the first of the year, changed his name to Robin. Now Bob is now Robin. Robin is now identifying as a woman. I don't have a problem with that. Robin is a good person, pursuing her passion, pursuing who she needs to be. And as I told her, I don't understand it. I'm probably never going to understand it. But I love you. You're a friend. I hope this is what makes you happy. And the other part is, I'm kind of glad I don't understand, so I wouldn't have had to deal with what she had to deal with all these years. And I think if we come to that place, I think if we get to the place where we want everyone to be able to pursue their happiness, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, if we really believe in that, this will be one of those things.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah,
America's about freedom, and I'm going to defend your freedom to live your best life, whether I understand it or not, whether I agree with it or not, or so on. I'm going to protect it.
Yeah, that's all I have for that. Obviously we're going to get into this because the right is never going to let it go. This is something that incites passion and anger and division. I hope it doesn't. I hope at some point we can put it past us and we can begin to talk about the things that are really important, like rebuilding our economy, like whipping this virus, rebuilding our infrastructure, getting education for our children, healthcare for our citizens. I could go on for hours, but I think there are more things that are important than this, than us dividing ourselves over this issue. That's where I think we should leave that. The next question, and I better go back and I better hit the button because I forgot what the last one. The next question is, should Joe Biden pardon all the people that stormed the Capitol and use that as a peace gesture toward the right? They write almost half of the country voted for Trump, although the few hundreds that stormed the Capitol were wrong. We cannot group all 70 million together. The Democratic Party has shown serious neglect toward the values of middle America, or that middle American values. We need a way to deal with that, and it won't happen if we don't even try to understand the core of the issues. Let me start with, let me give you the opportunity to say the what I'm thinking to the answer. Should we pardon them?
I think what you're thinking is no. Next question.
Expletive. No. Under no circumstances do we pardon these criminals. Sorry. If you went in there with the intent of defecating on the floor and urinating on desks and smashing the inside of our Capitol with the intent of stopping the elector count and stopping the peaceful transfer of power that has been the hallmark of this country since 1800, no, you go to jail. No, you are held accountable. And not just those people that were actually in the Capitol. For me, it's all the people who enabled them and incited them and encouraged them to go. We're now finding out so much. So for me, this idea that we're going to blanket pardon everyone, no. Now, should all 70 million people be indicted because of it? No, but you do have to go, hey, I think we were wrong. We were wrong in that this election wasn't stolen from us. We were wrong in that there wasn't all the fraud and all of the stuff that the Giulianis and the Trumps were throwing out at us. At some point, It's okay to be wrong, but you got to admit it. Or am I missing something here, Brett?
No, I think you're right. I think the listeners' concern for bringing the country together and bringing the right and the left together into some place where we can have some kind of common discourse. Something that's all intentioned in exactly the right way, just not on this issue. I mean, if anything, we should unify around the prosecution of these people, and they should probably be expelled from, from the groups they inhabited previously. And we should all come together as Americans and say, no, talk about politics stopping at the water's edge. You know what I mean? This is where we all come together.
No, and for me, the other part of this
have to be held accountable.
Right. The other part of this is this was domestic terrorism. Our country was attacked. We were attacked from within. We would have never allowed the Islamo-fascists to come, but it seems to be a lot of the Christo-fascists we're okay with. It was a little light treason. Nothing overly heavy. And well, hell, we recorded it. So we were open about it. And look, I don't know how it happened. We shouldn't have been surprised by it because they were saying for weeks and months that they were going to do this. It just again shows me this level of some people are more equal than others.
Right. And that's, one set of rules for one group, another set of rules for everybody else. And that's one of the things that we really have to attack. And, I want unity as much as the next guy, but, not on this issue. These people did what they did, and they came very close to what could easily be called a massacre. I mean, they were very close to some of these folks, and it could have turned really bad. Not to mention, it killed 5 people. You know what I mean? They killed 5 people, and 4 of them I'm not all that sorry about. The 5th one bothers me an awful lot. But this is something that if this had happened, if anyone else had done this, we would all be outraged, and rightly so.
Right.
But sometimes when we have certain groups of people who engage in this kind of behavior, they seem to have a tendency to think they're going to get away with it. And then we get to watch them at the airport, getting arrested, trying to hop their flights home, which I'm sorry is the most delicious thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. I found great joy in that as well. But, the weird thing for me is the people who are calling for this kind of forgiveness, this kind of immunity, this kind of pardon behavior is they're the same groups who have for years saying we need hard laws, mandatory minimums, we need maximum sentences. They're the law and order people. In fact, to be interesting, my neighborhood, and I live in a very conservative neighborhood, before the attack filled with we support the police signs. Oddly enough, the day after the attack, those signs seem to have disappeared. So it's one of these weird moments where the winds of anger seem to be now pointed at police and at establishment and at law and order because we are holding some of these criminals accountable. Look, I don't want anyone attacking our Capitol. I don't want anyone trying to usurp our democracy and undo a couple hundred years of peaceful transfers of power. And it's not going to happen. And that's why they need to be held accountable. At least my thoughts.
Right. And when you look back, I know there's been a million different comparisons to the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer and so on, but a lot of the people who are asking for this forgiveness now are the same people tweeting out, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. You know what I mean? And we're having these kind of Rambo fantasies during those things, and a couple of them actually went out and killed folks.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing the application of law and order, in the same light as we did over the summer, and we really need to address that.
I got to tell you, one of the funniest things for me, and it's not funny, but I guess ironic. You had Lauren Boebert, who I have affectionately titled as Gun Fetish Barbie. She tweeted out on the day that today is 1776. Now, for me, as someone who knows a lot of so-called patriots, who are the overthrow the government crowd, for me, that's a dog whistle saying, "Hey, this is the beginning of the revolution. Grab your muskets, boys. We're going to war." What I found interesting is the same woman who said, "Hey, today's 1776," then said, "I wish I had my gun with me." The Capitol Police, I would have protected everybody from the people that she riled up. So it was kind of this weird moment where you go, okay, you helped incite these people to this, and now you're talking about wanting to shoot them. Which side of this have you chosen? Because it's a weird moment.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it was in the events since that day are almost stranger than the events of that day. And seeing how, and watching the spin machine work now, here we are a couple weeks out, and, there are people out there saying that we should just forget it. Just forget it. Impeachment, forget it. It's stupid. Don't do it. You know what I mean? It stuns me that an attack on the Capitol of the United States, regardless of who's responsible for it, is something that we're like, meh, let's just let it all go. And it absolutely stuns me.
Right. Now they hit this point that, and they argue that it's the Democrats who don't, understand, Midwestern values. And I would argue that I may agree a little bit. Democrats, I think, have done too much on the side of Wall Street, not enough on the side of Main Street. I will openly and fully say that. But the Republicans have been just downright against everything that our country was built on, the American dream was built on. So this kind of double standard, and then saying that the media has done all this. No, we've allowed ourselves to do this because I would argue things like Facebook have put us in our own little silos where we're not willing to talk to each other. And I hope this is a moment where we wake up from that and we begin having these conversations.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did my graduate work in rhetoric, in learning about public discourse, learning about persuasion, learning about how groups of people are moved. And the one thing I learned that was probably the best lesson of all is that no one is above the influence. If you think that you can't be moved by this stuff, you're wrong. I'm a professional. I've been doing this for a lot of years. I'm not above the influence. I still get pushed and moved and moved around the chessboard in some way, shape, or form. I'm usually fairly aware of it. But, it's something that just happens. These things, they come at you, in a very repetitive manner, in a very think tank approved and focus group tested manner that is really, really good at stoking two things: one, fear; two, anger. All right. And that's what we live on. We live on fear. We live on anger. We get people to react rather than think. And then we push them where we want them to go. And if you want to see how far that can go, watch the footage from the Capitol. All right. Because you can watch those folks from early in the day. It's a rally. They're there to support Donald Trump. And throughout the day, they get a nice little feed of negative rhetoric, some shouting, some screaming, and hey, let's move up that hill. And guess what they did? Exactly what they were told to do.
Right. So sort of wrap this up.
Sure.
I think everybody who was involved in this has to pay the consequence. You do the crime, you do the time. For the people who were there as the supporters who didn't go in, clearly there's nothing we're going to lock those people up. But as a society, we do need to. They're going to need to say, look, hey, we were wrong, and we have to go. Okay, we accept you back, and there not be a lifetime full of browbeating and all that. But there's got to be that kind of act of contrition. There's got to be, hey, I screwed this up, and we got to be big enough to go. Yeah, we've made mistakes too.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's a great way to sum it all up.
All right, let's move on to the next question, and it's about you knew this one was coming, and look, as a labor guy, I've been hit with this a bunch over the last couple of days. It's over the Keystone XL Pipeline. What are your thoughts on Biden revoking the permit for the Keystone XL Pipeline? I have heard that the loss of 11,000 jobs is inflated, and that many of those jobs are temporary. Do you have any information on what the true impact will be as to the loss of jobs? I've heard the same thing. I've heard between 8 and 11,000, back and forth somewhere there. Big number, probably close to right. I've actually heard somewhere around 2,000 actual jobs on the pipeline. That's the number that I've also heard. But here's the thing. I'm gonna push back on the idea that construction jobs are temporary. These guys make their living off of doing temporary work. They build a building, they move on to the next building. They put together a career of doing temporary jobs. So I'm never going to diminish a job. Am I sad that they're going to lose a job? Absolutely, without question. It's a difficult thing. And look, I've lost jobs over the years. I know how it feels. We as a society have to figure out how to make sure that they don't lose their standing. They don't lose their livelihood. They don't lose their homes, and that we've got to figure that out. But my position on the Keystone XL pipeline is what it's always been. That pipeline especially is the dirtiest tar sands oil that they're shipping right through the country. It is the worst kind of the oil as I understand it. And Brett, maybe you can share some thoughts on it in a second. But it's that really dirty stuff. And if we're going to move to a greener, cleaner economy, if we're going to get away from burning oil, you can't have this massive vein of the dirtiest stuff imaginable pumping right through right through your veins. This in my view can't be allowed to be completed because we're 50 years into this. Then we're saying if we build the pipeline 50 years down the road, we're still going to be doing this. I say right now we make the investment, a huge investment, which Joe Biden has said we're going to do, in moving towards doing all of the above, going after solar and wind and tidal and geothermal and technologies, investing in research and development that we haven't even imagined yet. I got to think in this day and age, with as smart as we are as a society, we can get off of the dirtiest of the dirty oil and not have our entire country's economy dependent on one pipeline. That also said, those people who are going to lose their jobs, they're going to be the first ones in line for the new jobs because guess what? They're the most skilled to do the work that we need. These are people of high skill, high ability, and I'm most certain that they'll be the first in line to be able to pick up those new jobs. So am I upset that they lost jobs? Absolutely. I feel for them and their families. But as a matter of the entire country and the future for my children, I think we have to come to the reality. We can't have this dirty stuff. We can't keep doing this anymore. We've got to draw the line somewhere, and this is where that moment is. I'm curious your thoughts, Brett.
Yeah, I kind of look at it a little bit kind of a macroeconomic way. What we've got here is a situation we are doing some individual harm in the hopes of doing some collective good. The idea being that we all benefit from moving in a different direction, investment in infrastructure, and so on. And that's great. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. But there's still a number of people out there out of work that you have to look in the eye and say, I'm sorry, but your job is going away. And those are difficult things to do at the same time. Now, it's been necessary in our economy for the entire history of our economy. And so it's unfortunate that this is happening, and it's going to probably be a long-term gain. I just fully understand that probably doesn't do much to comfort the people who are staring at job loss.
No, and I'll go back to, I'll use a frame that Newt Gingrich used. To highlight your point of the macroeconomic side. He goes, do you want to be the best maker of buggy whips and vacuum tubes? Our economy grows, our technology grows and gets better. We could make the best buggy whips and the best vacuum tubes, but nobody uses them anymore. And We're going to get to a point to where, we're not using oil anymore. We're moving towards more energy independence. And for all the people who are out there scaring and fearing everyone into, now we're going to be dependent on the Middle East and dependent everywhere else. The whole idea of moving to a cleaner, greener economy is so that we're not dependent on anyone else, that we can be independent. So for me, saving the climate, absolutely something I'm encouraged by. But ultimately, I think moving to the green technologies are going to make us more energy independent and less dependent on those places that hate us.
Yeah, right. And to be honest, the next leader in green energy is the next great superpower, and it's got to be us.
Excellent point. Because the Chinese are going full bore into this as well. So you're absolutely right. And sadly, they've stole most of our technology. So right. We're behind on that as well. I hope that answers the question. If you want to follow up, please let me know. I'm more than happy to give some thoughts. Let's move on to the next question. Next question. Biden set forth a plan to strengthen worker organization and unions in part of the platform he ran on. What are your thoughts on his plans? Is there any substance there? Do you have hope that this plan will yield some results for unions and the working middle class?
I swear I didn't write that one.
Are you sure about that? Because this seems like
I didn't write that question.
This seems like a beach ball size softball.
Right.
But do I have hope? Yeah, I really do have hope. And let me start with day one. So this is where my excitement gets. My excitement gets that on day one, Joe Biden gave Peter Robb, the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, till 5 o'clock to resign. And when he refused to resign, he was fired. That tells me that Joe Biden has done more to strengthen labor unions than any president in my lifetime. Because Peter Robb is one of those guys, and his deputy, Miss Stork, they have been the worst arbiters of the National Labor Relations Board, coming up with some of the most anti-union decisions, anti-worker decisions over these last 4 years. So his departure tells me there's an opportunity for people to organize. There's an opportunity for the National Labor Relations Board to actually do its mission, which is to be the fair arbiter of people, how people organize and enforce the law of the land with union organizing and the workplace. What we had under Rob was a guy who had both hands planted on the steering wheel, driving right down the corporate highway. This is a guy who, and there's symbolism here for me, because Peter Robb was one of the guys who was back behind Reagan's firing of the Patco workers. He was one of the attorneys who basically argued for the air traffic controllers back in '81 to get fired. And not just be fired, but permanently barred from any federal employment ever again. It wasn't just enough that you lose your job. You can never reapply. You can never work anywhere else. They blacklisted them. So for me to have him enjoy the wonders of the things that he's been promoting, like at-will employment, seeing him fired, for me is a good thing. That sends a message. Now, Joe Biden's endorsement of the PRO Act, for me, is another one of those huge moments, because if we can undo some of the scourge of Taft-Hartley, we can end these idiotic right-to-work laws and give people truly an opportunity to join and form unions through the card check process, instead of this long-term harassing secret ballot process that gives employers ample opportunity to hold captive audience meetings, ample opportunity to bring single workers into 5, 6 people ganging up on them in management. There's an opportunity for us to grow. If you go back and you look at how my grandparents' generation organized under the original National Labor Relations Act, it was by card check. You got 51% of the 50% plus one to sign the card. You began negotiating. The company and the union hammered out an agreement. At a certain point, they came to an agreement, or people went on strike. And that's okay too. At some point, you've got to give workers some bit of power to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. Understand the law of the land as it was intended in the Wagner Act of 1935, the NLRA, doesn't give employers one paragraph, not one sentence, not one word of rights. Because they understood from the beginning, employers have all the rights. There was a master-servant relationship, and they understood that. So what the law did is gave workers some bit of footing to be able to negotiate. And we used the federal government to encourage that, because guess what? Back during the 30s, there were ugly, brutal, violent, bloody strikes. There were people getting beaten and killed on picket lines because they had the audacity to say, you know what? My kids should be able to eat. We should be able to live in a house. We should be able to exist off of the labor that we do and off of the wealth that we create. And things were so bad that the government said, yeah, we think workers should have some rights. So for me, Joe Biden saying we want to protect the right to organize, the PRO Act, is huge. But beyond that, his use of regulatory oversight, putting somebody at the NLRB who's going to actually fulfill that mission is of great hope to me. And I could go on for much, much, much longer, but the fact that he's going to move on a $15 an hour minimum wage within the next couple of weeks, hopefully, tells me that he understands that workers need a raise, and that we all need a raise. And he's going to fight for that. And we're going to rebuild that prosperous middle class that our grandparents left for us. Brett, before I go on for too long, do you have a thought on it?
Yeah, I don't have your ability to speak on this subject, with the same encyclopedic knowledge, but I will add this little nugget to the conversation. we seem to have been operating for most of my life. I'm 46 years old now. We seem to be operating for most of my life on the assumption that if the business does well, then the workers will do well. If there's a lot of profit, then therefore workers will do better. And there is not and has never been any correlation between these two numbers. Throughout all of labor history, workers have only ever gotten what they demanded. So taking away workers' rights to organize and join hands and fight for their due, which is pretty much what we've been doing since Reagan, is chopping away at workers' rights to organize. And of course, wages have dropped pretty much right in line with those, with those moments where the corporate world has had victories over working people. So Joe's focus on allowing people to organize and getting people, back into a union structure can only be a good thing for working people.
And I've said this before, Joe Biden was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice. But he is right now our president, and I'm thrilled that he is. Because on this issue, I think Joe is going to mandate that we do allow unions to grow and workers to democratize their workplaces. And with all federal contracting, he's going to use the power of that. But more importantly, as we move to this green economy, as we move to these jobs that are going to replace the pipeline jobs, he has promised that he has pledged that those are going to be, if workers want them, they're going to be union jobs. And I know the polling says, 60 million people tomorrow would join a union if they could. What's stopping them? Well, 70 years of ossificated labor law that has swung the pendulum of power to the worker, to the supervisors, to the management people, to the bosses, and taken that power away from workers. This is Joe Biden, hopefully with the passage of the PRO Act, giving some of that back. And then it's up to us. It's not him. He's just giving us the tools to it. We then got to go do the hard work of organizing ourselves and then doing the even harder work of fighting for those benefits. I said a minute ago, we have a rich and bloody and violent history of labor in this country. We didn't get a benevolent employer didn't grant us the 8-hour day. A benevolent employer didn't grant us a minimum wage, didn't grant us weekends, vacations, pensions. None of that stuff was granted out of the goodness of someone's heart. They were fought for. Generations of workers before us fought for them. And sadly, it's only taken really one generation for most of it to be eroded. It's going to be our turn to stand up, fight for something, and leave our kids something better. So I hope that answers the question. Again, if you have any thoughts, any questions, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got some other things that we need to get to. The next question, another employment kind of thing. And this is one that I think we may have some interesting back and forth on. What about asking U.S. companies to stop hiring thousands of people outside of U.S. while there are perfectly able-bodied people able to do those jobs here? It's time to put focus on the needs of American that are suffering and will suffer from the changes Biden will be putting in place to cut carbon emissions. I don't agree that we're going to suffer for the cutting of carbon emissions. I think we're going to come up with new technologies and new jobs and that stuff coming out of that. But to your first point, this idea of hiring from outside the country, I too have concerns because we hear about the high-tech jobs in Silicon Valley that we're bringing in cheaper labor from places like India and Malaysia. Because they've focused on educating their workforce more than we seem to have focused on educating ours. And there are some people who can do those jobs, and we should be addressing that. If there is an American here who will do that job, they should get that job. But what's interesting is we seem to focus on that, not so much on the jobs at the bottom. And look, I know everyone loves to say that I'd go back to doing that. We're not getting people to pick apples. We're not getting people to work on farms. It's not really happening. Now, I guess we could say if the wages were high enough, that would happen. Maybe. I still doubt it. So we're going to need fresh labor coming in. We're going to need younger people to come in because we're getting to be old. And we're most certainly going to need educated people to come in. So I'm not so bent on slamming the doors behind us as some may be. For me, this issue is, if there are people who can do these jobs, They should. But here's the thing: where my mind goes when I read this is that we've got laws on the books to address this. Employers put out a notice, and there's a process. If they can't find someone here, then yeah, they should be able to go find someone elsewhere to run their business, or they're going to get up and move. We need to be enforcing those rules a hell of a lot better because we're not. And the more that we don't enforce it, the more they're going to do it. So for me, it's about enforcing the laws that we have, not so much making up new ones. So I think that's my point on it. Brett, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just that we have this idea of our businesses having the freedom to make their own decisions and to look around for the best price on labor and things like that, and they do, and we have a tendency to demonize them for doing it in some places and reward them for doing it in others. And I'm not sure that is a very fair system, especially when you consider, in most cases, goods can cross whatever border they want, looking for the best return on investment, but labor is almost always chained to its country of origin. It's a pretty immiserating situation for the working class. So it's a difficult issue. It's really complex, and it's hard to work out. But this idea that we should spend more time and focus trying to create better jobs for more Americans and lift up as many people as possible, that's a situation that only has good outcomes as long as that's our goal.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's move on to the next question. Do you think the working class is accurately represented in media, whether it be mainstream news reporting or in film? No, I don't. I think the working class is generally viewed as a bunch of dupes, a bunch of people not smart enough to tie their own shoes. You think Fred Flintstone, you think the guy Jackie Gleason's character in The Honeymooners. You think of these people who are the butt of jokes. And I knew a guy years ago who wrote the book Working Class. It was about just that, how our media demonizes the working class. It was written by a guy named Pepe Lastina from Princeton, and it's clear. I mean, in every film, especially today, a working class guy is viewed as a dupe, as somebody less than important. And for me, when I grew up, it was a little different scenario. There were some very few, but there were some that were saying, look, if I could get a union job, I can lead the American dream. If there were ways, there were people, there were voices that were promoting working class outlets. There aren't anymore. That stuff seems to be gone. It's part of why I started doing the program, because the working class is so demonized. I've always said there's value in work, and I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care if you sweep streets, dig holes, or you're a brain surgeon. Every job should come with some bit of dignity and respect. If you're going to get up every single day, you're going to punch the clock, you're going to work hard and play by the rules, you and your family should be able to get ahead. And I don't care what you do. And I think we need to have those, we need to command and demand that be the reality. I go to, I'm in a lot of different circles, and some of them are people who have really big titles and big jobs, and it always comes around the table. Well, what are you doing? I say I'm a truck driver. I'm proud of the fact that I've driven a truck all these years. I'm proud of the fact that I've driven millions of miles without an accident. I'm proud of the fact that I work hard for everything that I have, and that my work was well compensated. The problem, what's happened in this country, is work isn't being compensated. And we need to one, change that, but we also need to respect each other in the work that we do. Let's go to the professor for his thoughts. Any thoughts on is the working class accurately depicted in media?
No, I think that's a pretty easy no. When you talk about, where's today's working class hero? You know what I mean? You don't really see many of them. A lot of this has to do with, with some of the classic disconnects between, you call it coastal elites, call it Hollywood, this, that, whatever, whatever buzzword you want to attach to it. But in many cases, the people writing this material aren't from here, wherever here happens to be, right. Working class America, middle America, whatever the case may be. And so, of course, that distance is going to bring a misunderstanding about folks, as it always does. And the farther you get away from a major city, the worse it gets. If you add people who are one working class and two rural, well, then you get some pretty ridiculous portrayals and so on. So but it usually has to do with that distance. The farther the people writing and producing and creating this material are from their subjects, the more ridiculous the end result tends to be.
The more extreme the caricature becomes, and the stereotypes become. And for me, the idea, and the reality is corporate America writes this stuff, and they want us to be put down. They want workers to look like dupes and the caricatures of stereotypes. So for me, it's part of why I've started this program. Let's move on to the next question quick. We got two more, and I want to quick bang through these because I want to get through. Again, thank you for everyone who submitted questions. I want to get through so everyone gets an answer. Have you seen the documentary American Factory? How have unions lost so much influences in former strongholds as seen in the films? I have seen American Factory. Have you seen it, Brett?
No, actually I haven't.
Okay, good. To me, the American Factory movie is everything that's wrong with what happened in this country. They allowed a Chinese company to come in and buy up the old GM plant out near Dayton. And your state of Ohio gave a shit ton of money to this Chinese glass company. I mean, huge amounts of money. And they hired a bunch of former union members who were starved for jobs because they basically gutted the whole area and the economy was depressed. So this Chinese company came in and promised jobs. The problem is anyone who had the audacity to talk about a union, and there's a great scene in the movie where a supervisor is literally talking to one of the people with the cameras, saying, "This guy and this guy, they're talking about joining a union. They're not going to be here tomorrow." Literally on camera said, "We're going to fire these guys because they want a union here." For those who don't know, that is patently illegal. That is an unfair labor practice, and with a functional NLRB, probably would have been something that would have been punished. It wasn't. So what did they do? They went, and the movie's great. And if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest it. It's on Netflix. They try and work these people to the bone. They try and do what they get away with in China. They try and skirt safety laws. They try and skirt health safety laws. They try and skirt minimum wage laws. They try everything in the book to break down labor conditions. And you go, well, why didn't they organize? They didn't organize because it's damn near impossible with the way our laws are set up. And when you have a company where they let them film in the boardroom, the guy saying that if they form a union here, we're going to close down. Again, let me remind you, patently illegal. But we've allowed these companies to have so much power, so much control, and so much influence because our politicians tell us, well, we need them, that they get away with this stuff. And in the old days, my grandparents' generation would have shut that plant down, and everybody who they fed would have been shut down too. And what did that do? That made good corporate citizens because people were like, hey, we don't want our employees striking. We want our employees happy because our happy employees who show up to work every day and produce our product bring us profits. It may be a little bit less profits, but at least we're not going to strike the entire economy. So what did Taft-Hartley do? Well, when they brought in Taft-Hartley in 1947 over the veto of Harry Truman, what it outlawed were those secondary strikes, those supplier strikes, which meant that, well, you could just go somewhere else. So all of those things that my grandparents used to build the most prosperous working class in history, Taft-Hartley and a number of other amendments to the National Labor Relations Act have made that stuff illegal. So for me, the fact that Joe Biden is talking about repealing that and giving us the ability to fight for those better wages, hours, and conditions, give us the chance, a fighting chance, I'm thrilled with. But I saw the movie. I liked the movie. And I know a lot of people are going to go, oh, it's Obama's movie. No, it was a company that Obama was behind. They did a great job on it. Highly, highly, highly suggest seeing it. You should see it, Brett.
I'm going to see it as soon as I can.
All righty. Let's get to the last question. Do you believe America is truly post-industrial? If so, how can the economy absorb people who would otherwise be working manufacturing jobs? What will the new gigs be? I don't believe that manufacturing is dead. I believe that we need to reinvigorate our manufacturing base. And I think this pandemic, Brett, I think this pandemic highlights the fact that we need a robust manufacturing sector. Because if I don't know about you, but trying to find an actual N95 mask is damn near impossible. Get a ton of K95s or the KN95s, those cheap Chinese knockoffs, but none of the good ones that were made here. And for me, I'm a firm believer, always have been, of domestic production, domestic consumption. We make what we need. We don't need the Chinese firm to come in and make all of our rail cars. We don't need Chinese firms to come in and take our factories back to China and build products and send them here. We can do it ourselves. But we're going to have to, and this is where the blind squirrel, Donald Trump, found a nut. China's a problem. We got to deal with this. We got to deal with their slave labor. We got to deal with their currency manipulation. We got to deal with their mercantilist policies, their massive government, state-owned enterprises. We got tons to deal with. But saying that we're post-industrial, I don't buy it. I do think we're going to be much more mechanical. I think automation is going to be here, and we should not run away from it. I am not a Luddite. I don't say smash the machines. But I do believe that we need to have a government who is going to step forth in a very robust way and provide jobs when the private sector can't, or more likely won't. And then we need to tax these big employers who do automate. We need a massive and a robust tax on the top 1-2%, so that it does trickle down to the rest of us. We can do this. We can have an economy that works for everybody. We can have an economy that creates jobs and profits and all of that, without having desperation and poverty. And let me go over to the professor and get his thoughts.
Yeah, I think that that in the pandemic is something that I think is really focusing our attention on some of these issues. Because one thing I think everybody out there is going to have to come to terms with is the fact that what's happening now, and with all the time that we're spending indoors, we are fundamentally changing how we consume goods and services. I mean, just we're doing things differently now. We're not going the places we used to go. We're not doing the things we used to do. And we're getting our products and services through different means. There's a very good chance right now, my children are 11 and 13 right now. There's probably about a 75% chance the jobs they have when they become adults have not yet been created, have not yet been invented. Probably their job titles don't currently exist today. And that's just the speed and the pace of the economy that we're dealing with. And so, but I think it's also a moment of opportunity, because what we're learning is we can't depend on others to produce the essential things that we need. Because every time we do, we find ourselves coming up short. Yeah. But when we invest in American business, when we invest in American innovation, what we end up with is, well, for example, a vaccine, 6, 8, 9 months sooner than anybody thought was possible. You know what I mean? So I think that we're both showing an opportunity for investment in American business, and certainly a need for investment in American production innovation.
No, and you're right. I mean, there was a study done, and I off the top of my head, I don't remember the group that did it, but they said 5 years ago, in 20 years, half of the jobs that we currently do will be automated. And we need to be preparing for this. And this is where, again, our political class, while we've been divided on who's going to what bathroom, or who's wearing what, or who's marrying who, or whatever. While we're focused on those issues, we're falling so far behind on what I think are really important issues on how are we going to feed our families, how are we going to keep a roof over our head, what are the jobs of the future going to be, and how can we move an education system towards that. We haven't even begun those conversations. That study came out 5 years ago. So we're closing in on that moment where automation's coming. And it's what are the new jobs going to be? Sadly, the new jobs have been things like DoorDash and Instacart and these gig economy jobs that don't come with any benefits, no health security, no retirement security, barely a minimum wage, if that, because, hey, you're an independent contractor. You can work for free if you want. We got lots of things to deal with. And I think Joe Biden understands that. And I hope he's going to begin addressing it. We've got a lot of work to do in the coming weeks, months, and the next couple of years. And we got to get to it. It's that simple for me. You got any closing thoughts, Professor?
Actually, no. I could not have said it any better than that.
Well, there it is. Again, I want to thank everyone who sent questions. Thank you. I appreciate, for the most part, everybody that we've met here on ThinkSpot. We're going to continue this every other week, every other Sunday. We're going to come here, answer some questions. If you want to check out our program during the week, live 9 to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday, you can get there at thericksmithshow.com or just right here on ThinkSpot. Come to our live channel. We put it there every day. The professor puts out some clips every day, also on our front page. If you want to comment on that, we will try and answer as many as we can. But thank you again. Appreciate the questions and look forward to back here 2 weeks from now. Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody.